So we've got our notes. Not that I don't think we need them.
Not that I don't think we need them. Not that I think we need them.
Not that I think we need them. Right. So welcome back, everybody, to episode 2 of the Tiny House podcast, which we don't have a name for yet. Maybe we'll just call it Living the Tiny Life podcast.
And we just started to film a different one, and we found it was a bit boring, so we decided not to film the thing about the YouTube channel. Essentially, the YouTube channel used to be called Weekends with Joss. We used to film our weekends with Joss, and then it became Living the Tiny Life over a period of time.
Yeah. Well, once we got the tiny house.
Yeah, once we got the tiny house.
And that was kind of it. So.
And we were just like, oh, and then the dogs were barking and stuff, and we were thinking actually it was a bit boring. So we're going to just talk about getting the tiny house and what it's like, which I think is what a lot of people are interested in. We can cover what we can talk about some things that come to our minds today, but I'm sure we'll miss like loads of things that people are interested in.
Yeah, so perhaps we could answer more.
Yeah, I think we can do this again. Once we've done this, once you've watched this, leave further questions below, and then we can film another one again.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll do that. But we are still at my mum's caravan. We filmed episode 1 yesterday, and we had so much fun. We thought we'd film episode 2 today.
Why are you being cringy?
I don't know. So yeah, getting the tiny house. We went through.
Yeah, so obviously we spoke about we were in lockdown and we saw Tiny Eco Homes UK, and then we were like, let's get that house, and we got really excited.
Yeah.
In the last episode, we sort of spoke about that very starting point.
Yeah, there was a bit of a backstory to the process of us actually buying the house. So a couple of the people that I've had come around, like media people who wanted to do things.
Yeah.
They always ask, you know, what was the inspiration for doing it?
Yeah.
And there's quite a big backstory which we explained in the last episode as to the process, as to how we got there.
Yeah.
But they just kind of like want it in a nutshell.
Oh. Yeah.
And it was like I can't really explain it in a nutshell because there's quite a bit of depth to it.
Yeah.
I
wonder where you were going with that. I was like, what point are you trying to make? So we explained the backstory.
Yes, the point is, it wasn't just, it's cheaper, let's do that.
No.
Which is what I think they wanted us to say. I don't know why I'm using so many hand gestures.
I don't know what you're doing.
But I think they just wanted the kind of cost of living crisis. It was cheaper, you did this, and that's all they wanted.
Yeah, and I don't think that's really the reality of it at all.
No, there's a much more deeper story to it, which we did go over in the last episode.
I think we just really don't want to live the way that lots of people live. There are lots of people in our lives that do want us to live that way, and we just don't want to. We don't want to have a mortgage. We don't want to spend our lives paying off a mortgage. We just want to live a different way of living.
Yeah.
And actually we're quite open to what that is. At the moment it's the tiny house, in the future it might be different things. But I think that can be quite my stomach rumble.
Yeah.
I think that can be quite hard for people to grasp, because they just want us to go, oh yeah, we did it because it's really cheap or something.
Yeah.
It's not it is cheaper obviously, but it's not the only reason.
Yeah, it only becomes cheaper once the house is paid for, and I think based on the amount of money we're paying now compared to what we would be paying in rent, I think it's going to be around about 5 years of living in the house before the cost of the house is paid. So it's going to take 5 years for us to really see the financial benefit from doing it, if that makes sense.
I don't know if that's entirely true. We do see the financial benefit from doing it right now.
Well,
because if we were living in a normal house or whatever, you'd have to have a job. So that's not true, is it?
But the fact that so we actually borrowed money to buy the house from Becky's parents. So we're quite flexible. Well, we can be quite flexible with how much we repay that.
Which... Well, we repay it in full, but we can be flexible month to month.
Yeah,
That's what you mean.
That's what I mean. So instead of having,
why are your hands so like?
I don't know. I'm just feeling expressive. Instead of having a set payment that we have to pay every month, which would mean that we would both have to work,
and like insane interest and all of those other things.
Yeah.
But also, it's not just that, because you would potentially have a low payment. Like, it's not just that, is it? Rent is much higher than it was when we were renting 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, so
bills are much higher. Cost of energy is obviously a lot higher, but was high when we were living in that big house as well. Like, we would struggle to pay those electricity bills when we had 2 jobs. So it's not there is a huge financial benefit right now. The financial benefit just becomes bigger and bigger as the years go on.
Yeah. But it's just not a case of, if you buy a tiny house, then all your expenses are cut in half, unless you get the tiny house for free.
And unless you probably, maybe it would be if you lived in a less expensive area. Like a...
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I guess it's all kind of relative. So we were paying $1,200 a month before, and now we're paying $600. So it is exactly half of what we were paying before.
In rent.
But we have the cost of the house.
But we have to live where we live right now because we have to be close to Joss.
Yeah.
We wouldn't live... So I know that in the past you've had comments on the video that have said, like... Oh, well, I could rent a house for 500 quid up north, right?
Yeah, up in like the Highlands or something.
Up in the Highlands, up north, wherever. And like, no doubt that that's the case, but that's not where we live. That's not where we can live right now. And also, that's not what we want to do. We do want to live in a tiny house. So that's like, we're talking a lot about money again, and actually it's not really about money.
Yeah.
Like, we want to live an alternative way of living for ourselves, for the environment, for the finances, for the less, like, having to do less cleaning, for being outdoors more. Like, I don't know, it's like a whole load of different things.
Yeah, I think one of the big things about living in a small space is it forces you to be more mindful of the possessions that you own. So going back to the whole minimalist thing that we talked about last time, it really forces you to do that. Whereas I find that if you have a big house, a bigger space, you tend to fill up with things, and you just accumulate things, and you kind of buy into that whole consumerism of perhaps buying a new sofa, and we've got a big gap over there, perhaps we should buy a chest of drawers or a sideboard or something. Whereas in a tiny house you just can't do that. You're really I think restricted is not really the right word to use, but I guess it is restrictive.
You're just more aware of your space, and
like, you can only have what you need, and
I don't know. There's something that I think we're not describing very well. It's also just like fun.
Yeah.
Like, there's just something really like fun about being in the tiny house and being like, I just have everything I need. It's very cozy. I just have what I need in here, and being able to have the van as well.
Yeah. So when we lived in the big house, I always talk about the big house because I think that's like the biggest comparison, really.
The starkest comparison.
Yeah, we just had so many things. Like, we had a table in the garage, we had bikes in the garage, we had some other things in there, and then we had the dining table and the chairs, and then we had the sofa and the telly and the coffee table, and Joss had a massive bed, and like, we had a big chest of drawers.
I think there might not be enough water.
I think
you're just not. You're just mindful is the only word to use for it. I think you're just not mindful of what you're consuming. You just buy stuff. You don't really think about what you're buying, and like, at least in our experience, so other people may have different experiences, but you buy lots of stuff. You're always thinking, oh, like a photo could go over there, or a candle could go over there. You just have stuff. You just accumulate stuff. You spend money. You buy loads of stuff from Amazon, and it's just a consumer culture, isn't it? And so that's something that we don't want to be a part of or buy into, and the tiny house helps us to do that. But also, it's just I don't know, it's just like it's just our home.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think that people can be like, oh my god, how do you do that? Oh my god, it's so small. It doesn't feel small to us at all.
I think from an outsider's point of view, living in a tiny house or a caravan or anything just seems so extreme that it's just a bit ridiculous.
But it's not.
but it's not at all. I think if we went from the big house to the tiny house and didn't have that in between at the farm, it would have been quite extreme.
Yeah, okay, and maybe it would be extreme for some people. I don't know, but I just don't think. I don't know. I just don't think it's that crazy. I think for the longest time, actually, through history, that is how people lived. People lived in one space with lots of people in that space.
Well, they still do.
Like, yeah, and they still do around the world. Like, it's not. I think it's only become something that is crazy because of the way that we're taught about. You have to have a big house. You have to have stuff. That's a sign of wealth or something. I don't know what it's a sign of, but it's some kind of legitimacy or...
Yeah, I feel like you're almost told that you should strive to have the ensuite bathroom and the big house and the driveway, the garden. Like, if you don't aim for these things, then you're a bit of a weirdo sort of thing. And I have felt that kind of impression from some people before. They sort of look at the house and they're like, oh, that's a bit weird or whatever. But I think, I think that human beings are very good at adapting to their surroundings as well. So I think that, well, the tiny house to me now, I don't ever feel like, oh, this is really small compared to that. So if I go around to my mum's house, for example, which is just kind of a conventional house, and then go home, I'm not just like, oh, this is so confined and claustrophobic. It's just home.
Yeah. And it's the same with the van. Like, there are moments where you feel a bit, like in the winter in particular, where you feel a bit like the van is a bit small. But when you're in the van, you're just in the van and you're just living your life.
Yeah.
I don't think it's not really that crazy. Like, I spend a lot of time in the van. I travel in the van for work. So often I'm also alone in the van. And it's just my space. I don't know. I think maybe we just see like space and possessions and things like that in just in a different way.
Yeah.
Which I think some people think is radical or something, but I don't know. It's just the way we see it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Did we scratch in the mat?
Do you want to let him out?
Yeah, I can do.
So what I was going to say was, so the first few months that we had the house were in the winter.
Yeah, so we moved. So we got the house delivered. I think it was on the 29th of November.
Okay, so
or it might have been the 22nd.
Okay, well, whatever it is, it's in the winter. It's getting very cold, and that was. I want to say it was challenging. I don't want to say that it ever was a deal breaker. We weren't like, oh, we're never going to do this. And actually, we had something really serious, not really serious, but like a really serious issue with the house at first.
Yeah.
Because the underfloor, so in the house we have underfloor heating, because basically it's the only way in a house like that to stop the floors from being like ice cold. So it sounds.
And it is really good.
I think it sounds kind of bougie when you say you've got underfloor heating, but when you've got underfloor heating that is only what. 4, 5, 6...
About 4 metres long.
4 metres long.
Yeah.
It's not expensive or anything. It's just like a really... Like, obviously, if you have underfloor heating covering a huge house, then that's different. But in this case, it's underfloor heating that covers a small part. It doesn't even cover the whole floor in the house.
I think it's 1 metre wide, 4 metres long. It's just a strip, and that's it.
So anyway, the underfloor heating broke, and obviously, as you can imagine, going into December, that was really challenging, and it was really cold. But it was never a deal breaker. It was never like, oh, now this has happened in the tiny house, we have to move back into a normal house. I don't think that's ever what we thought.
No, it's never even entered my mind. So the first sort of couple of months, the first sort of 3 months we moved into the house, we had a couple of issues. So the underfloor heating went, and that was a bit of a palaver because we had no heating at all other than the towel rail and the fan heater. Yeah. For about 2 or 3 weeks, didn't we?
Yeah, I know, it was really cold.
So that was quite cold. And then our water heater, that broke as well.
Was that at the same time?
It was a couple of months in, I think, that went. But then Chris came down and replaced that quite quickly, didn't he?
Yeah, and everything has been replaced. Like, it's not, there's nothing. It's all been fine because it's been replaced. It was very weird. It was very confusing why the underfloor heating wasn't working. We had an electrician come. There was kind of no real reason why it wasn't working. There was never really a proper understanding of what had gone wrong with it.
We never got closure on that, did we?
But it
just got replaced and
was replaced. So and that's fine. So we live and that's fine. But the point I wanted to make, I suppose, was that that first winter was challenging, also because we were getting used to the condensation.
Yeah, that was a big issue as well.
I feel like I don't want to say that word, because as soon as I say it, you'll just ramble on about condensation for like half an hour. David's like obsessed with condensation. He's obsessed with this condensation vacuum that we have. Nearly cried when we lost the charger for that condensation vacuum.
So annoying.
So angry about it.
Yeah, so...
And then...
Sorry.
And then like is obsessed with the dehumidifier. It has the dehumidifier on all the time. It just talks to me about condensation all of my life, and it's really annoying. So I don't really want to talk about it.
Okay.
But it was difficult.
Let's just cover the condensation.
I just did.
Okay. But
it was difficult because it obviously, where we weren't used to how much condensation there was going to be, it meant that there was some mould that we then had, and then we had to deal with the mould. Yeah. So once we were able to get a handle on those things, dehumidifier, condensation traps, all of those different things, everything has been fine since then. But that winter was hard. There were challenges because of the...
Well, we didn't know what we were doing.
Because of the heating and because of the humidity and everything. We were just figuring everything out, trying to work
probably the worst time you could move into a tiny house or something.
Yeah.
The worst time to have that kind of change.
Yeah, and also we were in lockdown, so I was working from home all of the time. So I think that's a bit crazy as well, to like move into a smaller... I don't know if anyone could imagine moving into a smaller space during lockdown. Yeah. I think people wanted bigger spaces, they wanted gardens, they wanted all that kind of stuff. But we did have lots of outdoor space.
Yeah, it's just that initial winter was quite hard. We just didn't have a clue what we were doing.
Yeah.
And that was evident in issues with condensation and mould and everything like that, which we are now on top of. We haven't had... Well, we've had 2 winters since then, had no mould at all.
Yeah.
We've got condensation traps where they need to be. We've got the window vac, we've got a dehumidifier.
Yeah, everything's
heating
sorted,
works.
really.
Haven't had any issues with hot water.
No.
Everything's great, you know, we're all kind of settled in now, and we know what's what. We know what we need to do, and it's great.
Who wants to throw the ball?
Throw the ball for the dog.
Throw the ball for the dog. Did you just say that?
Throw the ball for the dog.
Pros and cons.
Yeah, so a couple of pros and cons about the house. So, I mean, obviously that first winter we had... I think I filmed a pros and cons video quite soon after that winter. So I had lots of things to be like, oh, this is a con and blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
Which I would say not all of them are so relevant now. So one of them I said was about our water pump as well. So the first water pump that we got with the house wasn't very good.
Oh, it was awful.
And I had to...
It wasn't just awful. It wasn't just not very good.
It was terrible.
Really, really bad.
Yeah, so...
I forgot about that.
I had to basically siphon the water.
Dave would have to suck on the tap.
Yeah, I'd have to like...
to pull the water, like to suck the water out.
I had to like siphon the water through the kitchen tap.
It was awful.
For the pump to recognise that there was a flow of water and it would kick in.
Yeah, and so when the hot water tank broke, he replaced that.
Replace the pump as well.
Because it was bad. So a lot of the times when they build these tiny houses, they're plumbed in. Like, it's not common that they have a water tank. They're often plumbed in, which we are now, but at the time we couldn't be plumbed in. So we had to have the water tank on the side of the house, and that meant we needed a water pump. And I think because he hadn't had many that had tanks, he didn't know whether the pump would be good or not. So very much to his credit, like, he replaced the water pump for us, and it's the pump we have now is great. We're plumbed in now, so we don't use it. But before we were plumbed in, it was really great.
So yeah, the water pump got replaced, which I said was one of the cons originally.
Oh, okay.
And well, I think I said rather than the con.
Can I say what my con is?
Okay.
I think that my con is that it's actually not as easy to move as I would have liked it to have been.
Or
as I would have first... Yeah. What else are we moving?
I don't know, the water pump.
Is the house itself... I think lots of people think, oh, you can just like hook it on the back of your car. I think that's what I thought before we bought it. We could just move it like you would a caravan. But you can't do that.
No.
It's big, it's heavy, it's dangerous to move. And you have to have the right insurance, obviously. And you can get insurance for caravans that includes towing insurance, but you can't get insurance for towing tiny houses unless you have, or boats or whatever, unless you have like a business where you do towing. So we could move it, but we'd be uninsured, and that would obviously be really silly.
Well, we'd be insured to tow the house. So if we had an accident and crashed into
sure.
someone, it would be insured. But the house wouldn't be covered.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
We're allowed to tow it, but the house itself isn't insured.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Did I not make that clear?
No, I thought you meant like...
Okay, well anyway, so it's much harder to move than I think people think.
Yeah.
And if the next thing for me would be to get to live in something that's much easier to move.
Well, I think it depends what you want. I think if you want something that is mobile, then a tiny house probably isn't really going to work. I think the way to look at the tiny house is that it's a static home.
Yeah.
But it can be towed rather than
Have to go on a
put on
lorry.
like a lorry flatbed and like transported.
Yeah, so something like this, what we're in right now, a mobile home would have to have like thousands of pounds.
Yeah, it would
to
cost
move
thousands to move it.
So it's not as hard as that. It just costs like a few £100s to get someone to move it. I mean, obviously depending on where you're going in the country.
Well, we could move it if we wanted to. You would just have to take the risk of if we hit something or it tipped over, that wouldn't be covered.
Whereas a static caravan, you couldn't move it by yourself. So
yeah,
obviously,
unless you had a lorry.
But that has been, I think the reason why that has been challenging is because of what happened where we were living last, because they suddenly decided to redevelop the land, and that meant that we needed to move, and so that was quite frustrating. If you owned your own land, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, so not being as mobile as you thought.
But there's also like a pro to that, in the sense that you have more space than you would in a very mobile caravan. Obviously, if something's very mobile, then it's small.
Yeah, it's all give and take, isn't it? So
and you wouldn't have the same insulation. You wouldn't. It wouldn't be as warm. It would be made out of plastic. Probably wouldn't be made out of wood.
Yeah. So even in this static, I feel like it doesn't have that same build quality that the tiny house does.
No.
So it's all kind of give and take. The tiny house obviously weighs more, so it's harder to tow. But then you get that solid structure that's well insulated, not only in the winter but in the summer as well.
Yeah,
so static caravans and normal caravans get incredibly hot.
Yeah, they're like greenhouses in the
summer, and in the winter they're freezing.
Yeah.
Whereas the tiny house can regulate the heat a lot better.
Yeah.
So it's all kind of a bit of give and take. But yeah, not being able to move it as freely as we thought, I guess. Not that we really want to. We're not going to tow it around the country. And so I think some people think that that's what you can do. You can.
Yeah.
Just tow it around and treat
can't.
it like a caravan. But yeah, not really.
It would damage. I think it would damage the chassis over a period of time and stuff.
Possibly.
It's not really meant to be towed loads.
Yeah.
And that is something that he said to us. He being the person who built it, the first time we went up there, he said, I don't want you to think that you're going to be towing this around the country and you're going to be moving it over and over again. Think of it as something that can be towed, but something that you wouldn't be towing very often. And he was very upfront about that. So it's not like he was I'm not trying to say that he was deceiving us. I think it was just my own misunderstanding.
Yeah. I think, to give you an idea, to transport a static caravan like this would cost about, well, depending on the mileage, around about £1,500 or £2,000, depending how far it is. But to tow the house, we paid that guy like £200 to do it.
Yeah, I know.
So it's a lot cheaper. Yeah, so if we ever need to move the house, which we have done, we just pay someone else to do it for us, because they're insured, they already have the vehicle, and it's just easier, isn't it?
I feel like we've rambled on about
We have rambled on about that a lot.
I'm trying to think about pros, because we've already kind of spoken about the pros. Obviously, financially, there are lots of pros.
I think what a lot of people don't get, that we get, is the financial freedom of it. And the impact that's had on our whole lives, really. Because me being able to leave my job because of the financial gain, or not the financial gain, but the financial benefit of doing it.
The lower expenses.
Yeah, the lower expenses. It's had a huge impact on our lives. Like, we've travelled a lot more because you work from home. We can travel a lot, and you can work in the van, and we have so much more freedom. Whereas a lot of people that I know don't have that at all, and they're just working endless hours just to pay their mortgage.
Yeah, and we are able to have Joss way more.
Yeah,
whereas before, yeah, that's the other thing.
I keep saying that's the other thing. I don't know why I keep saying.
We're able to have Joss a lot more, which obviously is great for him and great for us. To be able to spend that quality time, I think particularly getting a lot of quality time with you,
Yes.
I think has been really great for him, and he's really valued that. I think it's, well, I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he loves the times when you're like, when you're spending time with him in the evenings and spending time with him during the day, and able to be there in the like right now is the Easter holidays, and we're able to go away. In the summer holidays we'll go away, whereas David's jobs before were quite restrictive on holiday. You'd have to work a lot of weekends, like particularly in the mornings of the weekends, which isn't the worst. Obviously people work much tougher shifts, much longer hours, but it wasn't great when he was coming here on the weekends, and then you'd have to go to work, and there's not a lot of time then for us and stuff like that.
No, it was hard, and there was a point where Joss started playing football on Saturday mornings, so I wouldn't pick him up until pretty much lunchtime on Saturday. Well, I'd go and watch him play football, and then he'd come back to ours. Yeah. But pretty much lunchtime on Saturday, and then I'd take him back to his mum's on Sunday evening.
Yeah, and that's
so he was only with us for like a day.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'll pick him up again from football on Saturday, but he stays with us until Tuesdays now.
Which so we have a lot more valuable time.
Yeah, we have much more time with him.
Then in the summer holidays, when we have him for the 3 weeks that we have him of the 6 weeks of the summer holidays, which we have in England, it means that we can basically go away for all of those 3 weeks, or two of those 3 weeks, or whatever it is. Or even if we can't go away for all of them, you're with him. You can take him to go play football. You can play on his Xbox with him, whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot more quality time that you get to spend with him. And I think that he sees the benefit of that. The other thing I think that I suppose is important to talk about in the tiny house is that Joss lives in the tiny house with us, and so this wasn't just a decision that we were making for ourselves, but we were also factoring him in. And so we were worried about that. I don't know that people really know how worried, like people close to us really realise how worried we were about that, and how much thought we put into him, and would he be comfortable. And I have to say, like, he doesn't care.
No, he doesn't care at all.
I thought he would be so bothered. I remember when we were living in the old house and we first told him about the tiny house and we showed him a video, and I remember thinking that he was going to go like, what? No, I don't want to do that. That's not what, like, I hate that idea, and he was going to be really opposed to it. But he was really excited, and he was like, oh wow, his house going to look like that, blah blah blah, like just getting into it.
Yeah.
But also, there's one thing seeing it on video, and there's another thing actually moving into it. Like, so all of those steps, you're thinking, oh God, is he going to start going, no, I don't want to do this. This is not comfortable for me. Or, I mean, obviously he wouldn't say those words, but he might like express frustration in some way. But he never has. He never does. He never has. And a big factor, I think, in that is the second van conversion, because then he's able to go out into the van and play on his Xbox, and that kind of gives him a bit of independence and a bit of space, and things like that. So, but regardless of all of that, the tiny house is a big factor. And in his other homes that he spends a lot of time in, his mum's house and also your mum's house are normal houses, big houses, has his own bedroom and all of that kind of stuff. So we've always worried about the contrast between those houses, but I don't think that he cares at all.
I think we thought that maybe he wouldn't, well, I don't know, we thought possibly he wouldn't want to come to ours anymore because he didn't have a desk and he didn't have like his own room as such, like a big room with a big bed and everything. But I think it's quite the
And
opposite.
you don't have loads
really.
of toys and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
but no, he
Doesn't
well,
care.
as far as I know, again, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he really enjoys coming to stay with us, and like you said,
Living with us.
he
He
uses
doesn't come and stay with us.
Okay.
He lives with us.
but he essentially like lives in the van conversion, doesn't
Yeah.
he? So we do have the second room in the house, which he does use.
second
occasionally.
bedroom.
Second bedroom, which he does use.
Yeah,
on
sometimes I
occasion
need to go away in the van for work or something, and so then he's in the
in his bedroom.
bedroom in the house, or he wants
Sometimes he wants to sleep on the sofa
to
downstairs.
sleep inside. So mostly because he wants Luna to sleep
Yeah.
on him or with him or whatever. So it varies what he decides to do, and we give him as much kind
Yeah.
of flexibility with that.
But
as we can.
having the van conversion is quite important now, really, because that's almost like his own room. It's the
Yeah,
van.
and it's also quite important for me sometimes when I need to have when I am working from home and I need to have important meetings, going out into the van can be quite important. So I don't get disturbed by the dogs.
Yeah, so you go out to the van, I'll stay in the house with the dogs
Yeah.
and do some housework or whatever, and you can just be in the peace and quiet. So yeah, that works really well.
But then that kind of makes me feel like we're cheating.
I suppose you could argue that, but
You should call this video "Cheating at Tiny House Life."
yeah.
No, I mean, I'm joking. Like, the van is a van. It's a tiny space. It doesn't, like, suddenly mean that it, like, solves all problems or, like,
No.
or anything like that. Like, sometimes we do feel a little bit on top of each other, or feel like, or I feel frustrated because I'm trying to work and the dogs are barking or something like that. And whereas in a normal house, you would maybe put them out in the garden, or you put them in another room, or you do whatever you might want to do. But we can't do that, and so sometimes it is a little bit frustrating.
Yeah.
But nothing that we can't handle, and the van really kind of takes the edge off of that.
Yeah.
If we are feeling like I need to just go out and really concentrate, or sometimes you go out there and just chill and
Yeah, I think without the van,
yeah,
it would be very difficult.
yeah, because not because of us, but because of Joss.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
he
because
needs
of Joss.
space.
Yeah, so in the house, if Joss is in his bedroom playing on his Xbox,
Yeah, so loud.
he's really loud, shouting and screaming with his
You
friends.
might be able to hear him occasionally at the moment where he's playing in the bedroom, and you can
Yeah,
just
he's
hear him
playing on
talking
his-
and shouting.
playing on his phone
But
at
at
home.
home it's like 10 times worse. so-
Yeah. Yeah, so if we didn't have the van, that'd be a lot harder. And then I think if we didn't have the van when you're working,
Yeah.
there would just be nowhere to escape to unless you drove to a local library or something.
Yeah.
Which could work,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't be very practical.
Yeah.
But then in saying that, we use the van. I feel like we're just talking about the van now, but we use the van like not a week goes by where the van doesn't get used. So it's a tiny house in itself.
Yeah.
We have the house and the
Yeah.
van, and they kind of like work together.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like we were talking about pros and cons, and we've just talked about the van for ages. We haven't really talked about any cons.
I only just mentioned the van.
I
there.
know, but I think just over 2 years into the tiny house now, I can't actually really think of many cons.
I can't even really. That it's weird. I also can't even think of like what you would describe as a pro. Like, it's just we just like doing it.
Yeah,
we
it
just like
just is what it
living
is.
in the van.
It's not
in
like
the
this
van
is
in the
great,
house.
this is not so great.
No, just like it. We
no.
just like enjoy it.
And-
The biggest pro, one of the big pros, is the cleaning.
Yeah, so I can do a thorough clean of the whole house,
Like under the sofa,
like under the sofa, under the kitchen,
like
everything.
every place, every nook and cranny that might build up dust or dirt or food or whatever.
Yeah,
Especially with dogs.
A really thorough clean I can do in about 2.5 hours. The whole house, upstairs, downstairs, everything.
I think it's less than that. I think he.
I can do it
It's
quicker,
a bit
but if I
of a
do a really thorough
perfectionist.
clean and get the sofa out and everything, it takes about 2.5 hours. So that's
But
really
day-to-day
easy.
cleaning, you can just do a quick clean and tidy up in like 10 minutes.
bearing in mind we've got 2 dogs as well,
Yeah.
so it gets much dirtier much quicker.
Yeah.
Hairs everywhere, Digby hairs everywhere, Luna hairs everywhere. So yeah, cleaning's really quick.
Yeah.
One thing that is a little bit annoying, which I did mention in the pros and cons video, is changing the bed sheets.
Oh yeah.
It's quite hard to change the sheets where you can't stand up and like throw the duvet around.
Yeah.
That's kind of difficult, but it's just one of those things that you don't put any thought into.
No,
'cause you have to
sometimes
do
you
it.
bang your head.
Yeah, bang your head on the ceiling. We do that quite a lot, but you don't put thought into it, do you? You're just like, oh, bang my head. Yeah.
Sometimes when I go downstairs in the morning, if I'm quite tired, I'm scared I'm going to fall down.
Do you? Oh, I never feel like that.
Because it's like a ladder.
Yeah. I suppose the only other thing is...
Sometimes I nearly do fall down.
Yeah, I don't know if you could say this as a con or not, but in the winter, if it gets really cold, the underfloor heating isn't enough to warm the house.
Oh no, yeah. You need a heater. Yeah.
You need to have a heater. Sometimes we just put a jacket potato in the oven or use the oven to cook. And then we don't do that just to warm the house up.
Not just a jacket potato.
But if it's cold, we're just like...
put a jacket potato in.
Yeah, don't turn it on or anything, just put the potato in the oven.
In the winter you do use the oven more though, don't you?
So we use the oven.
Oven cooked meals.
And the oven really heats the whole house up.
Yeah.
And then...
we just have the fan heater.
Or the fan heater, yeah.
Yeah.
So is that a con? I don't really know. It's hard to really think, isn't it?
I
think we've pretty much covered all the pros and cons. I'm sure after finishing this, we'll be like,
there'll be people who have questions, and then we'll think, oh no.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
You wrote adopting.
Adapting. Yeah, not adopting. Yeah, so just generally adapting to the house. So
I know it's so adapting.
We'll cover this briefly in the last episode, but going from the transition going from a house to the tiny house and like adapting into that small space.
I think we spoke about that in this episode too.
Have we spoken about that already?
We just said it wasn't that big a deal.
No, it just kind of it wasn't. I think our expectations were kind of met by what the house was. I've worded that really weird, but but I feel like I knew what the house was going to be like before we moved in.
Yeah, and it was like that.
And it was is exactly how I expected it to be. So there were no real shocks, I don't think.
It's so I struggle to talk about it because I feel like there are things that people want me to say. In my head, I think that people want me to say, "Oh, it was so hard. We had to like throw away loads of stuff.
Yeah, like the sacrifices.
There were so many sacrifices. It was so hard." I've said it was so hard like 3 times, but it's just not hard. I don't know.
No, it was really like seamless. Is that the right word?
There was the beginning parts that were challenging, but they weren't challenging because of the house. They were challenging because things broke. Oh, and also in the start we didn't have the sofa because that was back ordered.
Oh yeah, and then we had cushions
on the floor, and then that was
that.
a bit annoying. But again, that's like nothing to do with the house.
No,
that's just because
normal,
the sofa didn't come.
Yeah. Oh, so the other thing as well, when we were staying on the campsite in the beginning, we weren't plumbed in. We had the water tank, so we
used to have power cuts all the time.
Oh yeah, power cuts all the time.
That was really annoying.
But yeah, we had a water tank that we had to fill up with a hose, and the nearest tap to the house was about 80 metres away. So I had to buy this 100-metre long hose pipe reel with a big wheel and everything.
Yeah, I used to
had to like wheel it out
every
miles.
2 or 3 days. You used to have to fill up the tank, and it was like such a chore.
Yeah. So that was kind of annoying.
But it was kind of good to make you realise how much water you use.
Yeah, it made you really conscious of... You had, like, shorter showers.
And we also didn't use the toilet in the beginning.
No, we didn't either.
We didn't use the toilet in the house in the beginning. We can talk about that in maybe another episode. But we didn't...
I'll talk about it now.
Why do you go like that?
But we have a composting toilet in the house anyway.
And we didn't use it initially because, I don't know, we were scared to use it.
I think we were.
That's actually probably the thing that took us the longest to adapt to.
The toilet, yeah.
The toilet took us the longest to adapt to because we didn't want we knew a lot about like van life and and toilets that people had, and we did not want the standard toilet that you have in a caravan, which is a chemical toilet, because it's gross and it uses loads of chemicals, and so we didn't want to use something that was doing more harm to the environment than good. And it's just gross. So we didn't want a chemical toilet, so we got a composting toilet and never used it for number 2, we used it for number 1.
Yeah. Well, we had the facilities on the campsite, so whenever we needed the toilet, we would just go to the toilet on the campsite.
But we went for a wee in the house.
Yeah, so we used it for number 1s.
Yeah. So, because obviously you don't want to walk all the way to the facilities on the campsite like every time.
Well, we did.
Every time you need the toilet.
For like a year nearly.
For number 2.
Yeah, we walked to the facilities.
Yeah, but not for number 1.
No.
I'm saying because you wouldn't want to do that for every single time you need number 1. Because you need number 1 more than you need number 2.
Yeah, so we used half of the toilet, but I think we were a bit apprehensive about using the.
I was
whole composting
really apprehensive about it, but actually, it's fine. Like, it's so weird. Like, anything that if you are thinking that you are passionate or kind of want to live in a tiny house, but you're worried about stuff like that, oh, it's going to be too small, oh, will the toilet setup be good enough, it's annoying not having a bath, I don't know, like, whatever you might think about, am I going to bang my head all the time, blah, 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 blah. You just get over it. I don't know, like, if you're into it, if it's something you're interested in, none of those things end up really mattering.
No.
They're really insignificant. And
no, definitely.
And now I know that you prefer using that toilet than using a normal toilet.
Yeah, I really
I'm kind
do.
of indifferent, but
yeah, I much prefer the composting toilet to a normal toilet now. It seems a bit foreign to me to use a normal toilet.
But and actually, that's probably one of the things that people are like, oh, how does that work?
Yeah, so when we have people come around to the house, they don't want to use it.
No.
Do they?
Well, no, because it's different.
Because it's like strange.
And I think you're just used to going to in a particular, but that in terms of adapting, that's the thing that probably took us the longest to adapt to. That's what I was trying to say. And
definitely. And then obviously filling up the tank, and then the wastewater as well.
About filling up the tank. Oh yeah, we used to get rid of Dave used to get rid of all the wastewater.
So all of our grey water from the sinks and everything, we used to collect in the tank, and every evening we'd have to wheel it to the water disposal thing.
Yeah, but now
we're plumbed in. We're all plumbed in, so we don't have to worry about that at all.
Yeah.
So that's all good. But yeah, a couple of things we needed to...
Oh, we couldn't have fresh water out the tap.
Oh,
I keep remembering things. So when we're not plumbed in, the other thing was that we couldn't drink the water out the tank. Oh, no, out the hose. Because the hose wasn't food safe.
Yeah.
Food grade.
Yeah, so we didn't drink the water out the taps because it was going through that garden hose.
Yes, so and you can't drink out... In case you didn't know, PSA... You can't drink out of garden hoses. It's quite seriously even dogs can't. It's like chemicals go into the water.
Yeah, all the chemicals.
So don't drink out of a garden hose.
Yeah, so we had a separate tank, didn't we, for drinking water?
Yes, and then that was also really annoying having to fill that up, particularly in the winter.
Bad. It wasn't annoying.
It was annoying.
It was a bit annoying. But
it's one of those things that you just get used to, and then you start to realise, or you are more aware of how much water you're using, and it's.
Yeah, I mean, to live the lifestyle, you just... Did I say over you?
Yeah.
Oh.
So were you. Who else did you
But to live the lifestyle, there's just compromises you need to make, changes you need to make, and I think you just need to embrace that and just understand that this is a tiny house, it's not a normal house, and this is just what it is.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I suppose you could perceive as a con, but...
I suppose you could perceive as a con.
I think it's just what it is. It's just what it is. I think that's probably going to do it for this episode, though. I think we've touched on a lot of the things.
I'm not sure that any of what we were saying made any sense because we kept getting distracted by the dogs barking. So if there's stuff that didn't make sense, stuff you want us to expand on, questions, stuff we didn't cover, leave it in the comments.
I think it's easy for us to talk about it because we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and then we're going, oh yeah, do you remember this? But I might not have been clear.
Yeah.
And so just say, this wasn't very clear, can you elaborate on that? And we can...
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely do that. But we really hope you enjoyed this episode. I think next time we might talk about where to keep the tiny house. This is the big topic that everybody wants an answer to.
England, in the UK?
In England, yeah. There isn't really a direct answer as to where you can keep a tiny house, but I think we'll kind of touch on...
We'll talk about our experience.
Our experiences, anyway. We're not experts, we don't know everything, but we can talk about our experiences with where you can keep your tiny house. And everything to do with that, really.
Sorry, got distracted.
Looking at the dog's paw. But thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. And I guess we'll see you on the next one.
Safe drive, stay alive, have a lovely day.
Don't speak us.
Don't speak us.
Oh, God.
Cringe.